Thursday, December 9, 2010, to order at 7:35 p.m. and ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I ask for a motion on the approval of the agenda, the payment of bills was on the Finance Subcommittee meeting's agenda. I did not post it properly for this meeting, so we have made an amendment to the 15th docket, final presentation of the NASDAQ report, and just for the record, payment of bills will be on that docket. I need a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Mr. Wood, second by Mr. Pedro and Mr. Gibbons. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Those against? That passes 7-0. Thank you. Next, student government report. Dr. Morell.
Thank you, Mr. Mutter. Ladies, I'd like to invite you to come to the podium and present your report this evening and introduce yourself to the committee. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Cheeto. I'm Alyssa Marta. We're both active members of student government. In the past, we had the graduate fundraiser, and this was the talent show, and all proceeds from the talent show went to grad night. This past November, we also had our annual Turkey Baskets program. The baskets were delivered on November 23rd. There were 100 baskets were sent to the monastery, and in total, 203 turkeys were collected, along with boxes of baked goods to be donated. This year, we really saw our school come together and help the less fortunate in the community. Also in November, on Tuesday, November 16th, we had the junior ring ceremony, and all students who couldn't attend got their rings the next day. This went very smoothly. Ongoing events during this month of December, we have our adoptive family from December 1st to the 20th. 5 families have been adopted locally, 2 are from Cumberland, and 3 are from BF. On the 20th, we have a student government meeting, which isn't just the info students, it's the entire school, and here we discuss Adopt a Family with the rest of the student government members, as well as upcoming winter ball, which is February 4th. We also had our annual coat drive, an effort to keep everybody warm this winter. Many donations were made by faculty, staff, and students, and any extra coats were received went to the Goodwill in Woonsocket. We also have the annual teddy bear raffle going on right now. Students participate and buy raffle tickets to win a giant teddy bear, and all proceeds are given to Make-A-Wish Foundation. And for our community and environment this month, the students will be going to bring holiday cheer to the elder at Grandview Nursing Home. We'll be spending the day sharing snacks and playing games like bingo.
Thank you, girls. While we're here tonight, I certainly want to commend the high school and student government and all the students and faculty at the high school who've been working with the Happy Basket program. I don't know if you saw the article in the Valley Breeze today, but I did receive an email directly from John Johnson to compliment the wonderful response, actually exceptional response from Cumberland High School this year that has assisted with maintaining and really actually surpassing any expectations they had with regard to their food program this year and the food baskets for the holidays. So, girls, thank you very much for your leadership at the high school.
Thank you. Next is the chairperson's report. I'm just going to mention that last night the special programs subcommittee met in the library, received the draft with the officials from NASDAQ. The final report will be presented at 6:30 on December 15th in the Trans-Caf. And I don't know, Dr. Morell, if you'd like to speak to, we have, just to, as far as notification for anyone who would be interested in that important presentation. If you could speak to that, Dr. Morell.
Certainly. We're going to use a strategy with ConnectEd, and we've taken the flyer that we developed for the previous meeting, which we understand from our feedback was rather successful and seemed to get a good message out about the importance of the meeting. The last time we did send it out via paper, but in the interim, we've had the opportunity to update our phone and email backups with ConnectEd, so we really feel we have a much more robust opportunity to connect with families via technology. So we're going to use that to convey the time and location and information about the meeting. And in addition to that, we're going to reach out through the chair of the committee and through us directly to the mayor's office and to the Cumberland Town councilors. I've already contacted President Higgins this afternoon simply to let them know about the fact that the findings are now going to be available and to ask their attendance at the presentation of the NESDEC team. I think everyone knows that these findings may influence decisions that the committee makes either immediately or in the not too far future, and will have an impact on the district itself, the schools in the district, and families in our community. I think it's really important. Both Mr. Mudd and I am sure other committee members feel that outreach to the community is very important in this regard.
Thank you, Dr. Morell. Next is student achievement. This was the item that we had spoken about inside the workshop, various workshops that we had with this committee, and we had talked about the possibility of putting it in front of the docket. It was a better idea, and it came from feedback from the committee to put this front and center in a regular docket at the 7:30 p.m. And at that workshop, I had stated that we would, in December, at the December meeting, we'd like to talk about the assessment scores, the NECAP, and others at district. And I was speaking to Dr. Morell. We have decided, and we'll speak to that in a minute, to move that to January 13th. But I just wanted to put that on the record because I know that we had made a request for December. So, Dr. Morell.
Thank you. Tonight, the superintendent's report is actually in a little bit of a different format. Usually you've received an actual formatted report that has, the content that's going to be in it, and I apologize in advance, but I think, as you know, my access to computer and so forth has been limited in the last week, and I appreciate that you perhaps told me tonight that we would approach this a little bit differently. But by the same token, it doesn't mean that we're not going to get to the meat of some of the things that you'd like to talk about, and that are offshoots of the workshops that you've had as a committee, the orientation workshop that we had last week, and that we might want to think about this tonight as a segue or a little bridge, so to speak, between some of those opportunities that you've had to meet together and be thinking about your role as committee members in leading the district, your vision, as you talked about in the last hour when we were together, and the request that you made for presentation about the status of assessments, which gives a good profile of where teaching and learning is in the district. When Mr. Mutter and I were talking about that, really put on the table rather candidly that we could have done it tonight, and would have had nothing to do with my having a fall and so forth, but it would have been a very different kind of presentation. It would have probably been a presentation that Dr. Carney and I would have put together. We could have done that. Both of us very capable of sharing information with you about the work in the district, and have before. But as an aside, we'd also been thinking about that it would be helpful to this committee to see the breadth and depth of the work in the district and how that work is contributing to building capacity, and how that building capacity is contributing to performance in the district. And we can't do that with the two of us. So when we do come together on January 13th around that subject, we intend to bring our team of leaders in the district who are on the ground doing this work and have them contribute to the presentation, and hope that you'll find that very meaningful in terms of learning about the status of the Cumberland School. Hope that that will contribute to the work that you're thinking of doing in the future. So at the orientation workshop, some various subjects came up, and they seemed to come and kind of circle around. And I know Mrs. Teal talked about wanting to know more about where the Dana work was in mathematics, and we all have a real interest in literacy work, and PBIS keeps coming up, and thinking about the fact that work that you'll hear about in January will really be what it looks like in the schools and what's the result of the decision-making that's gone on here. I thought that tonight also part of that bridge would be how do we connect us, and how can you be thinking about what the backbone of that is. And I think the backbone is the BEP. And even though we have talked about the BEP in previous meetings, I thought that tonight would be an opportunity to go back there just a little bit, lay some groundwork, and talk about how the BEP connects to some of the things that you'll hear about in January. And also, from our perspective, share with you how we see some of the components in the basic education plan fitting into what has been the theory of action that we've brought forward in terms of making recommendations for improvements in the district. Just as a general framework, I did take an excerpt from the RIDE website where you can find a lot of information about the BEP, and I'd like to make sure that we have a small audience tonight, but an important audience, so I want to make sure that you have that available to you also.
Dr. Morrow,
Yep.
I get to interject right there. What is the BEP?
That's what I'm going to start
Oh,
with.
okay.
Right here.
Thank you.
No assumptions at all. All right. The BEP is a document approved by the Board of Regents. The shorthand, BEP, stands for Basic Education Program. And it's literally, if I read the definition from RIDE, it's a framework within which decisions can be made about whether a school district is offering a basic education program, including academic and support programs. And it's a very, weighty document, but not nearly as weighty as the document that existed previously. The document that existed previously probably spanned 4 inches in a 3-ring binder. All the districts had them. Predated electronics, to be honest with you. And it was an input document. You could go through the list, and when there were visits to districts to review the BEP, teams went in and were trained to look at inputs. How many of this do you have? And the typical story that you hear about is librarians. How many librarians are there at the high school? That seems to be the one that always rises to the surface. And it's everybody's example. Are you teaching a certain comprehensive set of courses? Does the district have, a principal in every building? So on and so forth. Inputs. If I have this input, there was an assumption or a theory that it equated to certain outputs, that the performance, the learning of students would be what you wanted it to be, what the expectation of the community was, that all students would learn, as long as you had all of these things in place. We all know that that is not the case. That in fact, you could have all of those things in place in some communities and still not have the learning. And in fact, the basic premise of this new BEP, or Basic Education Program, is that there are various ways to organize schools as long as it cuts across certain key areas. That the research now, after years of studying high-performing schools and high-performing districts, says there are certain, key elements that need to be in place. If you look at our strategic plan, we have 7 areas that we have been modeled. And those 7 areas have been the matrix, the sort of the headlines, if you will. The top of the story, when if you open the newspaper and you don't want to get into the details, the headline would be lead the focus on learning and achievement. The headline would be safe and supportive schools. The headline would be guiding curriculum. And so you can actually go to our last couple of strategic plans, and we've been aligning to those big ideas. This basic education program now takes those big ideas and actually cross-reference to some other ideas about leadership, about infrastructure, about content that needs to be provided, and set some performance indicators. And, honestly, some of the basic education program has been clearly articulated, the document. And, I guess what I would ask is, has everyone received or accessed a copy of the BEP at some point? I mean, sometimes you distribute, but then somebody will go, no, I've never gotten one. So if that's the case, maybe we should upload a document into school committee docs for everybody, because that seems to be something that would be very important for you to have. And the Department of Education is actually right now finishing the work on the performance indicators with a small group of superintendents that I have been fortunate enough to be part of. And I would expect over the next few weeks, perhaps, there'll be some release of that. But the work is all very transparent, so it's posted on the Department of Ed website. And you can go there and review what's been developed so far, and that's where all the new work gets uploaded. And I think it's a good example of everyone's responsible for their own learning. And if you go back and look at my superintendent's reports, really, most of them are at the awareness level. They're not real in-depth, but they're there to, bring the major themes and topics that, as a group, we need to know about, provide the committee and the community some initial awareness and understanding of them, and then give you resources and locations where you can find more information, not unlike what you would do in a good school or a good school setting. And I think as the committee is thinking about a vision, how can you model learning? And so being self-motivated and taking those days to do the follow-through is probably, in my mind, one of the best ways demonstrating the attributes of a learner. I think is a really good way to show to students and families and our own educators and administrators that you not only respect the way that they are delivering instruction and delivering learning in the district, but for yourself, you see this as a learning model. So the 7 areas are about families and communities, safe and supportive schools, and they're about curriculum, effective staff, and you'll see a lot of this mirrored also in the work that the state has done in their strategic agenda. One of the things I thought we could do tonight, though, especially since we want to kick off this idea that the school committee's work is about student achievement, is start with the top one on the list, which is about leading the focus on learning and achievement. And talk a little bit about what the responsibility of the school department is. And this may even lead the committee towards a little bit of that vision statement you were thinking about, because there are some specific responsibilities for, not to get caught up in jargon, but what's called an LEA. And you do hear these acronyms used frequently. So an LEA is a local education agency. So, and in this instance, that's us. That's the school department. And so some of those responsibilities are the supervision and the direction and guidance of the leadership. And of course, leadership is teacher leadership, formal and informal. It's administrators, all the way through to the superintendent, and it's your leadership. So it's a very, very broad, and I would think you could extend it to student leadership also in a very broad way, but most of the time you think about it in terms of that is putting structures in place for students rather than the student leadership itself. But I certainly think you may want to think about that. Also, it's a responsibility in this area to set expectations and the accountability that goes with expectations. And so what does that accountability look like? A good example of accountability practices are certainly to hear about the status of where we are. So taking that step in January to have the leadership team come in and talk to you about we're going to actually go beyond just the summative assessment of NECAP and hopefully talk a bit about the other kinds of assessment data that we're collecting and how we're using it, particularly when some of the most important work that we're doing is outside of the scope of anything that's formally assessed through NECAP. But then also, what are some other accountability measures that may be different kinds? For example, when you had the orientation workshop the other night, Mr. Mutter at one point said, we're going to have a mutual agreement. We were talking about communication procedures. That's a form of accountability. Making that commitment through a verbal or written agreement is a form of accountability. And so, in terms of the organization, what ways can you stretch the notion of achievement, and what ways can you stretch the definition of accountability in your time as leaders on the school committee? I think that's something to think about. And then lastly, it's a real responsibility of the district to move barriers out of the way, to move obstacles out of the way. If we know that there's something in the way of a student learning or a goal being met, whether it's a district goal all the way down to an individual student goal, it's definitely our responsibility to figure that out. And honestly, I think that's been one of the Achilles heels in the district and in the community. It's obviously been my catchphrase, 100% of the students, 100% of the time. So what does that mean? That's all of these things. But one of the things it means is when you find out something's not working, what do you do about it? When you, and the truth of the matter is, it's very hard to say, no, we're not meeting everybody's needs. That's one of those pushing it just about as far as, out there. And I don't think I'll ever forget the interactions I've had where folks have said, you don't want to say that. Well, I think I do. and I think many people in this school system have adopted that, because many rooms, many audiences, many places where I hear others, that even though I may have been the first one to utter that, it's been adopted by many people because of the concept of what it means. And over a period of time, the notion of that possibility of being able to figure out what a school system would look like at scale that actually might do that. It's provocative on one hand, but it's profound on the other. So that's absolutely in that leading the focus on learning, right at the heart of that. And I think when you keep students in the middle of any discussion, brings people together. And the more you can reframe difficult discussions around student needs, I think the more that you can cross the bridge around difficult decision making. And right now, we've been using, and I think many of you could say this back because, we
keep to this message, but a three-pronged approach towards improvement. And that does not mean that everything in the BEP is not something that the district is trying to address on some level. But it goes a little bit to what I was saying upstairs about, iterations of progress. Build capacity over time. And if you're trying to do everything all at once, you probably won't do anything. And if everything has the same level of importance, nothing is important. So for the past number of years, the areas that were identified as really needing the most capacity building were the two content areas of, the ELA or literacy, reading, and mathematics, and we've been focused on bringing the highest quality of expert support to those two areas across the whole district. At the elementary level, the work around with the Hill for literacy, it's actually transformed me because it's one of those things that that something has to be done, but you just can't get it done until you find the right resource. And they have absolutely, in my mind, been the right resource at the right time for this district. What we haven't been able to find is a similar level, high quality change facilitator for the secondary level. And that's something that I really needs to have the same level of attention, because those elementary are going to be moving into the secondary level, and there are students at the secondary level who have reading needs that were left unattended because we just didn't have the capacity to do that diagnostic work and the professional development and the training. There's an incredibly good website which I was reviewing, and I was pleased to see they've updated it, but I was even more pleased to see that Cumberland is one of the pieces of work that's documented. The Hill for Literacy has just made some changes, both in their leadership and in their location, so they've updated a lot of things. So you might want to Google that and or go to their website. Again, I can send you that and take a look, because rather than have me, I think, try to give you the whole background, it would be good for you to do some reading on that, and then it will make more sense when our folks come in January and they're talking to you about where we are, because you can read about the curriculum audit. That's been done a couple of years ago. The curriculum audit led us to know that we needed to put school literacy plans in place and a district literacy plan. That's been done. The district literacy plan led us to looking for a core reading program and buying the progress monitoring system that the council worked to help us purchase. I mean, one of the best of collaboration, I think, that has gone on in the community in a long time. And that progress monitoring system, the Ames Web, is the formative assessment data that we're using right now, and is really transformational at the elementary level and leading us to build capacity for that long-term summative assessment data with the kneecap data. And then with the Dana work, of course, we've been a couple of years now. Is that right, Dr. Carney? Spring of, right, and we went through a gap analysis which led us to know that we needed to look at the curriculum, what's called a guaranteed viable curriculum, which Sue, I think, explained to you the other evening when we were talking about that. Guaranteed meaning that it's accessible to all students, every classroom, every student, every day. That's kind of the little niche phrase. And upstairs I heard you talking about, how do you get it into kind of, I don't think you said this, but I think what maybe you meant, layman's language, So every student, every classroom, every day, that's what the Dana Center folks talk to us about. And the next step was the study of the standards, and then the teacher writing teams from district working with Lincoln and Woonsocket to do the scope and sequence, and now we're implementing the scope and sequence this year and developing the units of study that go with it. So, I mean, that's been that major work in, so we've had the two content areas. And then the other most significant piece of work which the school committee, a number of school committees have supported, is resources allocated towards safe learning environments. And when I say safe, I don't mean safe in a way that's like dangerously unsafe, but what I mean is safe in a way that it's a learning environment where when students arrive at school, the climate and culture in the school is appropriate for learning across all classrooms for all students. And so we were able to put the universal program of positive behavioral interventions and supports in place. And that really, the approach to PBIS has been the way we see clearing the decks, so to speak, to make sure students can access their learning in those major content areas. And I know that what we're going to be rolling out going forward, because of some opportunities we hope to have with the Race to the Top funds, is work in other content areas. When I attended the RISA workshop where they were talking about the BEP indicators and so forth, there was a document that I think it's actually on the RIDE website that David Abbott wrote. He's one of the assistant commissioner, and he speaks in there about a concept that towards the end of the document about functionality with BEP and how building capacity precedes performance, that people expect them to come simultaneously. So as soon as you start building capacity, you're going to see increases in performance. But you need to pay attention to what are the major areas that you want to allocate resources to. That's kind of what's defined as functionality. You need to build capacity around those areas. And when you have the two in place, that's what yields performance. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, I hope it makes sense to you listening to that tonight. It's perhaps connected to the conversation you had earlier, or what your own thoughts have been about how you want to do your work as a committee over the next 2 years, but also when you think, or when you see the presentation that we do in January, if you could be thinking about those. Well, what am I seeing? What are the areas that the district's been paying attention to? What do I think I know about why those are the areas? What's the capacity that's been developed? What can I tell about what I'm hearing and seeing that I can now know about the depth and breadth of capacity that's in the district in these areas? And so based on those, what's the next work? What's the gap analysis around that? That's something that the committee needs to consider in order to get that trajectory that we're all interested in. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Any questions? Any questions? Go ahead.
I have a quick one. Dr. Morelli, you talked about the district's literacy plan. I think that's what you referenced to that. Are we required to have plans like that for the other content areas?
No, actually, the plan was one of the pieces, like a roadmap or a blueprint that was part of the contract that we had with the Hill. So that when we laid out, how would we start, and that was the curriculum audit. That was what was going on at the time. We would use that data
to lay the plan out or the roadmap for how we were going to get to our eventual outcome. And actually, we're 1 year away from the final separation from the Hill. So their work right now is what they're calling turnkey work, gradual release work, and that goes to the capacity building because some districts and some projects become consultant dependent. And from the very beginning, we did not want that to happen, and we planned for this to be long term in terms of that big kind of strategic initiative, but eventually something that would allow the district and the professionals in the district to be more able to be thoughtful about how they would, the next time around, do the curriculum audit perhaps on their own, do the literacy plans on their own, do the data analysis. We're building that piece.
Anyone else? I have a couple of comments. First of all, I appreciate your efforts as we begin this process of this concept of student achievement, and as we spoke to the first presentation to January, as opposed to this evening. Now, in preparation for that, if there's anything that comes to mind that you think would be helpful to the committee, you could either email that or whatever would help in that discussion. And remembering that discussion is just an assessment of where we are. It's not meant to critique those results. We're looking at a starting point as to where we are right now. So if there's anything that you can do to bridge the gap of where we were to where we are, to help the committee understand that, and then anything that would make that discussion as good as it could be, I would appreciate that prior to that evening.
And if I could just add, so that you have don't feel like getting the rug pulled out from under you. We're going to present in January, and those results are not going to include this fall. All right, I think I want everybody to know that because sometimes you can get caught, in that cycle. But on the other hand, it'll give the committee a really good idea of what the data is that exists, and then when the results do come in, which would probably be within 2-3 weeks, a month most, we would expect after that, it'll be fresh. You'll be able to make good connections, and we'll be able to help you make those connections.
Yeah, I think so. We'll get those assessments, and then if you've given us some information prior to that to get us an understanding as to what has been done and the other things that are going on in the district, and then we'll see how they measured up against the actual results that come up. Okay. Anybody else? No. Ms. Williams?
Can I just make a comment with regard to what the chairman said about the presentation? You had spoken about, Dr. Morrell, what David Abbott had compartmentalized into two pieces, and one of them was the capacity building. Can you keep that in mind with the presentation, because it's helpful, I think, for us to know what capacity we're at now and where we need to be in order to move the trajectory in the direction that we want it to. I think that would be helpful. It's a great way to...
We'll certainly try to do that.
Okay, thank you. Next, comments from the public. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to address the committee? Ms. Steele.
How does the BEP tie into our budget?
Well, ultimately, the district is responsible to provide programming consistent with all of the components of the BEP. And technically, it went into effect July 1st. On a practical level, though, I don't think that there's any expectation that any district has all of the systems of support in place. But that's why this data dashboard is being created, the performance indicators, and a variety of tools for districts to look at their programs. And, you know, we may want to think about relating budget recommendations to areas of the BEP also. I mean, given the fact that there's a little extra window of time, I mean, it's a difficult budget for sure, but I wanted to think about some ways that budget recommendations might be helpful to you, or using something like the BEP as a lever to communicate the importance, or, you know, I'd be open to talking about that before the budget comes forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chu. So there is no one in attendance who would like to address the committee. Next, reports of standing committees. Mr. Wood.
As you mentioned before, the financial subcommittee did meet earlier. We will be reporting out the payment of bills at our December 15th meeting. A couple other things on the agenda. One of the things that was brought up, as everybody knows, each month you'll be receiving a packet of the bills. And you get to review those as you want. If you have any questions, even though it just can't be it's not just the members of the finance subcommittee. If you have any questions, you can email Alex and he'll respond back. If you have any questions on any bills, send your emails to him directly. The other thing on our agenda was the discussion of Sedesco's maintenance contract. There is the ability for the committee to actually take a loan from Sedesco to do some capital improvements. Alex or Mr. Bonanno actually went through and explained this to us. There was no action on this, and actually it was discussed probably to hold off on any kind of taking of loans or committing to any payments at this time. So it was basically just a discussion at that point. Also, the November budget summary is out. Committee members did receive it, and the rest of the committee will be emailed their copies of it tomorrow. So that's the committee, and we'll report the bills out next week.
Thank you, Chairman Wood. Any other member? Next on the docket is the approval of minutes, and based on the last meeting, please. We did. I'll make the assumption that new members of the committee will be abstaining from the minutes that they did not participate in. So I'm going to look for a motion to approve the executive session 10-14-10, the executive session 10-18-10, the special meeting 10-26-10, and the executive session 10-28-10. It's moved by Mrs. Bolio, seconded by Mr. Pedro. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Those against, that passes 4-0 with members Sansi, Gibbons, and Teal abstaining. Next, the special meeting 11-10-10, the workshop of 11-18-10, the regular meeting 11-18-10, and the workshop of 11-23-10. Pleasure of the committee. It's moved by, seconded by Mr. Gibbons. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Those against, that passes 7-0. Thank you. B.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pedro.
I'd like to make a motion to table B3, executive session, October 28th, 2010.
Mr. Pedro moves to table B3, executive session 10-28-10. Second by Mrs. Bolio. All in favor? Those against? That's tabled 7-0. Next, I need a motion to approve executive session 10-14-10, executive session 10-18-10, and executive session 11-18-10. It's moved by Mr. Pedro. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Teal. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, would it be best to just two separately from 11-18?
I violated my own rule there that I had set at the other. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Let's back. Did we have a motion in a second?
Mr. Chairman,
You already have a motion and a second. I think you need to have the second withdrawn, motion withdrawn, and then do a new motion.
I'll withdraw my second.
Thank you. That's why I was asking if we already had one. Thank you. Do we have a new motion to accept executive session 10:14:10 and executive session 10:18:10? Mr. Pedro moves that. Second by Ms. Bolio. All in favor? Those against? That passes 4-0 with new members Sandy, Gibbons, and Teal abstaining. And I need a motion to approve executive session 11:18:10.
So moved.
That's moved by Mr. Gibbons. Second by Mr. Wood. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Those against? That passes 7-0. Thank you. Under new business, we have homeschool instruction request 2010-2011 school year. Dr. Moore.
Dr. Carney?
You have two requests before you. Actually, they're both renewals. One is indicated as new, but that student had previously also been homeschooled some 2 or 3 years ago, so they're not new to homeschooling. I've looked over the programs. The documentation is there, and I would recommend that you approve.
Thank you, Dr. Carney. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Gibbons moves passage. Seconded by Mr. Pedro and Ms. Bolio. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Those against, that passes 7-0. Thank you. Next we have appointment of subcommittees and liaisons. And I do have it here somewhere. Here we go. Still holding off on some of the committees, but we will finalize that prior to the January, or we will finalize it on the January 13th meeting. On the liaisons to individual schools, Mr. Gibbons, BF Norton School, Mr. Pedro, Community School, Ms. Sandy, Cumberland High School, Ms. Bolio, Cumberland Preschool, Mr. Pedro, Garvin Memorial School, myself, John J. McLaughlin, Cumberland Hill Elementary School, Mr. Wood, Joseph L. McCourt Middle School, Mr. Pedro, North Cumberland Middle School, Ms. Teal, and Democracy Prep, Mr. Gibbons and Ms. Sandsey. And we will have the remainder of those again on January 13th.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Sandsey.
I think that Ms. Bolio and I are going to co-chair, co-liaison with community school.
Thank you, Ms. Sandsey. So we are going to, I think, was that? Okay, I didn't have that in my notes, but community school is going to be Ms. Sandsey and Ms. Bolio. We correct that for the record, please. Thank you. Dr. Morrell?
Yes, did you identify anyone for the preschool? Or is that the same as
I did.
Norton?
I intended to, so in case I didn't, it was Mr. Pedro.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask one other question?
Absolutely.
Well, actually, a couple. Do you have or do you intend to have a liaison for the Woonsocket Area Career and Technical Center?
At this time, unless it's different, we're still working on. I would imagine that answer is going to be yes, but we have not finalized the remainder. There was also discussion about OCYL liaison and some other discussion, but we will definitely finalize that by. Do you think there's a need for that that they're missing at this time?
It's not a need so much as that if you're going to finalize other schools where Cumberland students are, I would just ask you to think about not maybe delaying too long. I mean, I understand that you're going through a process, and that would be the same for, for example, that the SEAC, Cumberland Special Education Advisory Council, will be getting the school support visit through the Special Services Office in January. There may be a reason to want to have that liaison at some point, if in fact you're going to have a liaison.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bolio.
I had served as the chairperson for the Special Ed Advisory Committee, and until an assignment is made, I can certainly remain on that, given that the school support visit is going to be occurring in January. and would welcome if there's a
Sure.
reassignment. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, is there any, does anyone have a problem with that right now? Okay. And Mr. Gates? And we're going to establish Mr. Pedro at the Woonsocket Area Career and Technical Center.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rotella?
Democracy Prep was Mr. Gibbon and Ms. Zanzi. Thank you.
And one last question. Notification. May I ask procedurally how you want to handle that? I hate to use the word normally, in the past, my office would communicate to the schools when liaisons had been appointed. And I mean, for example, the Woonsocket Area Career and Technical Center would be aware that there would be a liaison. They have a function for the liaison. Has there been a communication already with Democracy Prep? Is there a function for the liaisons, or?
Let me say this first. If it has been done in the past that you've notified that, I think that would be great to continue that practice.
Okay.
I don't think we've established anything in respect to Democracy Prep at this time. Is that correct? Yeah, we have not broached that yet. We just basically established that as a liaison, and we've also discussed a liaison to the OCYL, but as far as the parameters of that, we have not gotten into that yet.
So perhaps I would hold back on that notification until, or
No, I think if you...
notification. And in it, I would usually say, you know, if you have questions about this, you could contact, should it be you as a point of contact? Because I wouldn't know how to answer the question about what the boundaries were on that.
I think at this point in time, we'll go through me, and then by January 13th, we'll have that ironed out. Thank you for your help. Next, personnel recommendations. Dr. Ron.
Thank you. On the appointment, request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Kathleen Heel, classroom assistant at Ashton School, effective December 13th, 2010. It's a budgeted position.
Ms. Passage. Second by Ms. Bolio. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bolio.
Dr. Morrell, typically what they call teacher's assistants, is there a difference between classroom assistant and teacher's? No. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Those against? That passes 7-0. Thank you. Dr. Morrell.
I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the FMLA medical leave of Ana Maneca Fernandez, classroom assistant, Cumberland High School, effective December 1st, 2010, and returning January 3rd, 2011.
Mr. Wood moves passage on the leave of absence. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Teal. Discussion? None, all in favor? Those against? That passes 7-0. Thank you.
That concludes personnel recommendations for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Morrell. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak to the committee? School committee comments, school liaison reports. Is there any member who has a report? Mr. Pedro.
I'll just like to remind everybody that Winter Wonderland at Diamond Hill Park is this coming Sunday, and the Cumberland Band will be performing at 2 p.m. in the ski lodge. And then the CHS Holiday Concert will be right here on Wednesday the 15th at 7:30.
Thank you, Mr. Pedro. Ms. Boyle.
I attended a workshop this past Monday evening on grading, which was nearly identical to the one that we participated in a few months back with Curriculum Subcommittee. And it was attended by schools from around the state. And it's part of the work that the North Kingstown School District is doing is with regard to their grading policy, and they've taken that on as an activity and have welcomed anyone interested in learning about what they're doing in the process they're involved in. So we'll be getting that information. Once I have that, I'll make that available to the committee. But if you do have a chance to either view the webinar, which I think we have available on a disc, it's very worthwhile. It's a few hours long, and the PowerPoint is also available one of our school committee folders. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Rattel, do we have an executive session this evening? We do not. I need a motion to adjourn. That's moved by Ms. Pedro, Mr. Pedro and Ms. Bolio. And seconded by Ms. Bolio and Mr. Pedro. All in favor? Those against? Passes and we adjourn at 8:35.